he was met by St. Peter and given a tour. They walked the golden streets of heaven, admiring all the beautiful mansions and estates lining the roads. Finally, reaching the end of a street, they stopped in front of a very modest home, well kept, but noticeably smaller than the huge mansions that they had just been admiring. St. Peter indicates this will be the man's eternal dwelling place. The man asks St. Peter why he gets such a smaller house when there are so many grand homes. St. Peter replies, I did the best I could with the money you shared through the years. I share that story today because we have moved into the stewardship season, at least for today and next Sunday. I should probably say we have moved into an intentional time of reflecting on stewardship, which is how we care for God's gifts and share those gifts, including our time, talents, and money with the Lord through the church. That should be top of mind for us all year long. But since it isn't, we take time to be intentional about it about this same time every year. With that thought in mind, the question posed to Jesus in this morning's passage from Matthew came up at the time of year when people were supposed to be paying their taxes. In response to the question, Jesus asked one of the people standing with him to show him a coin. They pulled out a silver coin called a denarius, worth about a day's wages. Then Jesus asked whose image was on the coin. Of course, on the coin was a picture of the emperor, and so people responded, the emperor's. Jesus said, give therefore to the emperor the things that are the emperor's, and to God the things that are God's. I imagine Jesus would answer the question in a similar way today. Jesus might tell us to take a coin out of our pockets and take a good look at it. What do we find on our money? Well, we find pictures of presidents, symbols of importance to our nation, and we can find the words, in God we trust. And so Jesus just might say to us, there you have it. Believe your money. Trust in God. But most of us don't believe our money. According to Reverend Edward Bowen, most people believe in their money. We don't put trust in God. We put trust in our own financial wealth. In this 21st century, the answer to almost every question is money. It should be God, but it's money. As I said before, many people have the attitude that it's my money and I'll do with it as I please. But that attitude goes against what we find throughout the Bible. The opening words to Psalm 24, for example, tell us that the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. In other words, everything belongs to God. God lends us the things of this world to use during our lifetime. Lends them to us. And in the Bible, one of the ways that people are encouraged to remember that everything belongs to God is by making offerings to God. Especially in the Old Testament, it is made clear that we are to offer to God the first and best of what we have. So that's what I'm going to do this morning. Here is one of the best illustrations I have ever read and shared about stewardship. It may sound familiar. I hope it does. The story was written by Eddie Ogan about a time in his life, the mid-40s, when he was 14 years old. Eddie had a little sister, Osie, who was 12, and an older sister, Darlene, who was 16. They lived with their mom. Their dad had died a few years prior, and their older brothers and sisters had moved on with their own lives. For about a month, the pastor of their church had been announcing that a special offering was going to be taken so that the church could help a poor family in that community. Eddie and his sisters and his mom had all been talking about what they could do to add extra money to that special offering. They decided they would buy 50 pounds of potatoes and live on those for a month. That would allow them to save $20 of grocery money, and they put that $20 in the special offering. They decided if they kept the electric lights turned off as much as possible and didn't use the radio, that would save money on that month's electric bill. Darlene, the oldest sister, got extra work cleaning houses and caring for yards, and the other two children did some babysitting. They took some change and bought some supplies to make pot holders. They could sell the pot holders for money, and they put that money in the special offering. They made $20 on the pot holders. That month of preparing and planning for the special offering was one of the best months of their lives. Every day, they counted and then recounted the money to see how much they had. At night, when they went to bed, they would imagine what the poor family would do with all that money that the church was going to raise. There were 80 people in their church, and surely with 80 people, they would raise enough money to help the poor family beyond imagination. The day before the offering was taken, the children walked to the grocery store and traded all their change and their crumpled up dollars into 3 crisp $20 bills and a $10 bill. They had $70 for the special offering. $70. At church, when the offering was taken, the mom put the $10 bill in the offering plate, and each of the children put in one of the $20 bills. Then after church, they sang all the way home. It was raining, but it didn't matter. They all felt so good for the way they were able to help. Later that afternoon, the minister stopped at their house. The mom answered the door, spoke to the minister for a few minutes, and then came back into the living room with an envelope in her hand. The children asked what the envelope was for, and the mother didn't say a word. She opened the envelope and dumped the contents out onto the coffee table. There were 3 crisp $20 bills, a $10 bill, and 17 $1 bills. $87 total from that church's special offering. The mother put the money back into the envelope. Not a word was spoken. The family went from feeling like millionaires for how they were able to contribute to that offering to now feeling deeply dejected. The minister had brought the money for the poor family to them. Night fell and they all went to bed. All Eddie could think about was that he didn't want to go to school the next day. Even though he was in the 9th grade and at the top of his class, he thought about dropping out because he felt so ashamed. Since he had completed the 8th grade, and that was all that was required, he felt like he would just quit and move away. He did go to school, but all that next week nobody said too much. Finally, on Saturday, the mom asked what they wanted to do with the money. The kids didn't know. They didn't know how a poor family was supposed to live. They'd always felt rich. They only had 2 table knives, but they shared those knives at meal times. They didn't have many toys to play with, but they had one another. Eddie and his family had all they needed to know true wealth and abundance. They also knew they did not want to go to church the next day. However, their mom informed them they would be going, and so they went. It just so happened on that Sunday, there was a missionary speaker from Africa. He talked about how villages in Africa were trying to raise money to build new churches. The speaker shared that $100 would put a roof on a new church building in Africa. He asked the congregation to think and pray about how they could help. Eddie, his sisters, and his mom all looked at each other and smiled. The mom pulled that envelope out of her purse and handed it to Darlene. Darlene gave it to Eddie. Eddie gave it to Osi. Osi put the envelope with $87 into the offering plate. After church during fellowship time, the pastor shared that $104 had been raised, enough for a roof on a new church in Africa. He said he hadn't expected that large of an offering. The missionary said, my, there must be some rich folk in this congregation. From that day on, Eddie writes, his family always knew without question that they were rich. Rich because all God had given them. Rich because how they could share with others. And rich because of how they shared with God. Friends, there's so much for us to learn from Eddie and his family. It's not just about what we have to give. It's more about how we give. Thoughtfully, joyfully, prayerfully. The psalmist said, all the world belongs to God. Jesus said, give to God the things that are God's. Doesn't that paint a pretty clear picture? And Jesus also said, for where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Today I invite you to consider your treasure. The good news is we have so much to consider. So during this season of stewardship, you'll be seeing the pledge cards soon. And as Eddie pointed out this morning, every dollar makes a difference in the life of this congregation. I invite you to consider your treasure and how you might share your treasure through this church, giving to God what already belongs to God. Let us pray.